You are listening to Autistic Stuff for Autistic People, a podcast from the Autistic Peer Support Coaching Collective and Fox and Raven Media. I am Aradia. I am the creatively autistic coach and the podcast producer for Fox and Raven Media.
And I am Cheryl. I'm a peer support coach and body talk practitioner who works with other late identified autistic adults to better understand their needs, challenges, strengths, and unique wiring to live with more grace and compassion.
And I'm Monty, and I'm an autistic peer support coach and rabbinical student and spiritual director.
We're back for, I guess technically season 3, but it's more like version 2 of the podcast here at Autistic Stuff for Autistic People, where we took a little bit of a break, and now we're revamping. We're coming back, and we're going to be more casual and friendly than ever. We're going to just kind of wing it and see what happens.
Woohoo!
Is it a version 2 or is it a version 1.3?
I don't know if that might be above my pay grade. We did what we did before, and that was a thing, but we maybe got a little lost in the weeds, so we decided we're going to be a little more casual about this and just try again. Same basic idea. We're autistic peer support coaches having relatable conversations, but now we're going to be a little more casual about it.
Talking about our lives, our weeks, and what's been coming up for us, and we just invite everybody to come into our conversation and be a part of it.
Absolutely. So without further ado, what was our prompt for today?
Yeah, what was the topic, Matt, that you kind of walked into the room with and you're like, we gotta talk about this?
I know this is going to sound cliche, but I really want to talk about love on the spectrum. I know that some of you might be like bored to death, both Aradia and Cheryl, but also to you, dear listener. You might be really, really bored to death when it comes to love on the spectrum, but I can't stop talking about it. Have you guys seen this show? Like any seasons? There's a new season out on Netflix now. For those who have never heard of this, it's a reality TV show that was originally from Australia that was brought over to the United States, looking at autistic people trying to find love. And I believe this is the 4th season now of the US version. Have you guys seen this show?
I saw like a half of a trailer for it, and it gave me such full body cringe that I ran away screaming. So I know the tone and vibe, and I've read discourse about it, but I've never actually watched enough of it to like say I've like seen it and absorbed like a whole storyline or character arc or anything.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have never seen it. I've never sat and watched an episode. I've only just, heard about it, read about it, that kind of thing.
So I've seen every episode of every season. American version, Australian version. There's a lot of criticism about this show. I see different types. First criticism I see from the autistic community. It's coming from a lot of low supports needs autistics saying, why isn't there more representation? Why is it all high need and medium supports needs autistics on television? What about me? A lot of the same kind of stuff that when you had the Barbie, for example, right? Same people saying low supports needs are not represented more enough, right? That's criticism, one I see a lot. Second criticism I see a lot from the autistic community is, oh, well, they're making autistic people look like they're all one way, which is a sort of another form of that same first argument of low supports needs folks feeling left out of the picture. The show heard that and did actually bring in some more low supports needs, medium supports needs folks into later seasons and current seasons. Then I see another thing, right? So I was diagnosed as a kid. And it gives me a little bit of a different perspective, I think, from a lot of people. Though, medium supports needs autistic folks, I grew up through that very common going from special ed to gifted to special ed to gifted, depending on, the teachers and how they felt about me at any given time. So I have a lot of friends, right, who were also diagnosed at a young age. Not to say that all people diagnosed at a young age are medium or high supports needs. Obviously, there's plenty of medium and high supports needs folks, more likely medium supports needs folks who are diagnosed later in life. And there's a lot of kids who are diagnosed early in life who are low supports needs, right? I see a lot of criticism in the medium supports needs world saying, all of you low supports needs autistics need to shut the fuck up and like the show because these are unmasked autistic people and they are living their best autistic lives and they're just being their unmasked medium needs, high supports needs autistics as on television, and how dare you talk? And in principle, I would agree with that if I actually thought these were unmasked autistic people, which I still don't believe. Then there's another critique of, I don't know if in this season they started paying them, but in previous seasons, these people were not actually paid to be on the show. And they were able to monetize it and get to speak at ABA conferences and all sorts of things. The show features a lot of ABA therapists, ABA coaches on the show, promotes ABA on the show. They even have an ABA therapist who's autistic, an autistic ABA therapist who's doing quote-unquote neuroaffirming ABA. ABA, for those who are not familiar, is a type of treatment. And I say treatment with finger quotes, or therapy in finger quotes, which I was subjected to for 8 years growing up as a child. Applied behavioral analytics, which is essentially dog training for autistic children to train you to be neurotypical. It was developed by the same team of psychologists at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, who developed conversion therapy for queer kids. It's essentially conversion therapy for autistics, is what you often hear it said at, and I find that to be quite accurate. They have therapists on there. There's another criticism that a lot of the Instagram accounts of these people on the show are run by their parents. They're using their autistic kids to adult children to monetize themselves and to, extract profit from autistic bodies. And also, there are some autistic people on that show who I think are doing their thing and living their lives and are running their own accounts and doing the thing, and that's great for them. Right? So I find we need a much more nuanced picture. And I agree with everything about people should be able to live their lives and be on TV and make their own decisions. And I find this idea that they're unmasked to be very offensive, because it implies that masking is one thing. It implies that masking is pretending to be neurotypical, which I'm sorry to say, and I'm sorry this offends anybody here or listening, that's a very late identified autistic thought. Whether you're a low sports needs or a high sports needs or a medium sports needs, because it implies that that's what masking is. Masking is getting your needs met in a maladaptive way for the short term while negating your long-term needs. So not actually meeting your needs met. When I say getting your needs met, I put that in quotes, right? For late identified people, for some low support needs people, that indeed, for the apparent so-called quote-unquote high masking people, that might look like pretending to be neurotypical. But for those of us who grew up in the system, who went through ABA, that's not what's being expected. What's expected is that you're going to be the docile autistic person, this respectful autistic person. Thank you, Aradia, for hiring my show. What's your favorite animal, Cheryl? Thank you. Feeding lines. The show shows people using the absolute typical ABA lines all the time, which is a different mask. I would say high masking is the people on that show very often. But it's a mask that is what society expects autism to look like. And to that criticism that autistic people with low support needs aren't actually on television and in media and aren't represented, nonsense. They are. They're called Dwight Schrute. They're called Leslie Knope. They're called Hal and the entire family and Malcolm in the Middle. But we don't call them autistic, because if we called them autistic, we just call them quote-unquote autistically coded. Because if we were to, as a society, call them autistic, you wouldn't be able to laugh at them anymore, and that would be unkind. That wouldn't be PC. The issue isn't that we don't have low supports needs autistics represented in media, it's that we don't call them that. It's the systemic issue. And I don't like this, like, autistic people fighting other autistic people over, right? It's like, it's dividing and conquering us. I just realized I'm info dumping, so I am gonna shut the fuck up.
There's so much in there that I think is so important, and it's funny because I have never seen the show, and yet I feel like I have now a little bit. So thank you for that. A couple things that I really want to kind of dive a little bit deeper on. This idea that, low support needs autistic people are not represented in the media, right? And we can all think of shows and movies that are filled with characters, and we're sitting there watching and we're going, oh, they're so autistic, and nobody's saying it. Nobody's saying the actual word, right? And, there's that frustration and sadness and grief sometimes that comes with watching something like that, where you're like, oh yeah, so all I am is the butt of a joke. My awkwardness, my challenges, even my gifts are still just part of this, we're minimizing it, we're trivializing it, and then we're kind of just making it a laugh track. So I think that part was really important. But I think that kind of leads into this larger issue. And I'm going to kind of speak a little bit against even us right now in this podcast, in the sense that most of the people that we see online, social media, are not necessarily even masking. I don't want to ever say somebody's masking or not masking, but there's a certain expectation, right? Matt, you said that masking is not just about acting neurotypical, but it's about getting our needs met in the short term at the detriment of our long-term health and well-being. And I feel like there's such a narrow view of what autism is based on who is platformed online. Who is platformed, right? The people who are platformed are people who are somehow able to produce consistent content, who, probably have people on their team to support them, right? They're writing scripts, they're filming regularly. Most of them are speaking. And I think there's just this expectation that that's the kind of autistic I need to be, right? If I'm going to be successful as an autistic person, I'm not even talking about acting like a neurotypical person, but like if I'm going to be successful as an autistic peer support coach, if I'm going to be successful as a writer who writes on these issues, I need to fit that very narrow definition or paradigm. So I think that's even, something worth contemplating. Like how do we define autism in our current conversation? And how do we feel when we don't live up to it? Because honestly, for the people out there listening who are maybe not autistic, but who love or live with or work with an autistic person, that representation matters. It impacts how they view and treat possibly that person in their life. And maybe even how that autistic person feels like they have to show up in that relationship. So
Yeah, absolutely. The concept of trying to perform not just neurotypicality, but performing like being good at being disabled or being good at being a woman or being your token model minority or I mean, I remember reading an article a long time about like being a good fat person and like all of the performance that people who were deemed overweight have to do in order to be like taken seriously. And it's just, it's the same thing. You have to perform. It's so, and I think that that was what gave me the full body cringe when I saw Love on the Spectrum for like a whole 30 seconds was like, it was just like, oh, this is such an intense level of masking that it's just like, I don't know, like magnetic repelling. I was just like, I I can't even process that. But then, yeah, also every single ensemble cast in a book, a show, a movie, there's always that one quirky character that you can identify with as like that's the one that's most like me. Sometimes it's an alien, sometimes it's a computer, sometimes it's just the one who's a musician or drug addicted or actually a time traveler. But like every single interesting ensemble cast has a character that like we all are like, yeah, but that one's me. That one's the most me of all of them. The mechanical genius that barely ever talks, right? Like they're always there. And they usually aren't masked in the same way, right? They're usually like the quirky one that brings the fun flavor text to the rest of the cast. That's like, I have a machete and a gun and I kiss the girl and whatever. But also there's the weird computer programmer off in the corner that wears purple. They're always there.
it's so funny that you just said that sometimes the character's an alien because I literally just started watching Resident Alien. I'm only a couple of episodes in, and the number of scenes that either I'm laughing out loud or I'm just going, why do I identify more with an alien than almost any other character I've ever seen? Coincidence?
I think
I
not.
think not.
I want to clarify that, like, I don't think everybody on the show is masking. And there are people on the show who I do identify with, right? I mean, I identify with everybody, but there are those who I think aren't. I think there are some people on the show who aren't masking. I guess I'm also opposed to this idea that, like, they're all the same, right? Which is, again, I see this in the autistic community. I'm not even addressing, like, all my criticisms that I see of the critiques of the show from autism parents and non-autistic public. And, like, you go on the Reddit of the show. There's an official Reddit of the show, and like you just see how inspirational. Like forget about. I don't even. That's not even worthy of comment. I think because I think it's obvious that like what we should all feel about that. Not well, right? For those who are, that's not clear, right? So not that everybody on the show is masking, but indeed, like people on this show, like when you're forced, and like there are people on this show who live in abject poverty, they're shown to like their worst sides of themselves on the show. So like it's like there's a power dynamic here, which also is encouraging to be that right kind of autistic person for the audience of this show, right? And I think it's actually kind of ironic that like I would say from what I can tell, and again, I'm not these people, and if you're listening and you're on the show, you want to come on, you want to talk about this, or you don't, totally cool, right? But I actually find that some of the ones who I sitting here as somebody and like I think that person's a bit more unmasked than maybe. And again, everybody knows themselves best, not me, not you, not like big disclaimer. But the ones that I feel that were more unmasked, more being authentic themselves, those ones are off the show. They make it for one season on the show, and they're taken off and replaced with somebody else who is more according to what society thinks autistic people should look like. I think that's interesting, and not in a good way. But I'm sensing that it comes from the autistic community, that even like we've internalized as a community that like what unmasked should be. It means that you should be wearing headphones and you should be stimming like I have, if you could see me rocking back and forth and overexcited, and that we should all love our weighted blankets and we should all love our stim toys, and like we all have to have the same stim toy, and if it's not that stim toy, you're not really autistic enough. But like that's even like somebody in one of our groups, our WhatsApp groups that we're in, was talking about autistic culture, and I never understood that fucking word. What's autistic culture? That like I do what other people on Instagram and TikTok do? No, like I don't even know what that is.
We're not a monolith.
Yeah, exactly. None of us are a monolith, right? And this show is reducing us to monoliths, so it hurts when you see autistic people also buying into that.
Yeah. This is such an important conversation because, and I love the fact that you brought in the fact that you were diagnosed as a child, and you're bringing in that really fascinating perspective. I was not. I was, identified at 40. I was diagnosed. And so, we have very different experiences, but I think we can learn from each other. And what I find really interesting is when I first started entering autistic spaces, like intentionally autistic spaces, workshops, discussion groups, things like that, I had been masking for so long as neurotypical that there was that period of time where it felt very normal, expected, to kind of look around the group and be like, okay, how are these people living? How are they acting? Right? So yeah, there was that expectation like, well, everyone else is in burnout. I must be in burnout. Right? People here in this group, maybe they, like you say, have the certain stim toys or certain sensory sensitivities. Like it was almost like I still couldn't filter anything through my own lived experience because there were so many layers between life and me, right? It just felt like there was just so many expectations, so many programs that were running. And it wasn't really until, I can't even remember when, but more recently than I'd like to admit, but sitting in a group and kind of listening to people's experiences and going, oh, it's not me, but that's okay. Like, I don't need to have that same experience to be part of the group. Like, we're all just doing our thing, I guess. I don't know how else to say it, but like this idea that autism is this one huge category, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, I definitely have seen with myself and other people in the autistic spaces I've been in over the last few years. Multiple people have said they've gone through that arc of, oh, I was on Instagram or TikTok for a while and now I need to back off from it because now there's too much mirroring and there's too much just masking what you're seeing. Like I have at least 3 people and myself have directly expressed this in the course of my last couple of years in these spaces of just like it's helpful to get started, but at a certain point like you end up just masking other people's behaviors. And yeah, there is a lot of bias in who's getting platformed and who's getting pushed out through those things. So once you get in the door and you start to meet yourself and you start to understand your own unmasking process, it can actually be quite vital to step back from those spaces that are so narrow and curated by virtue of how the algorithms and whatnot work.
Yeah, I have a fairly sizable social media following. Whenever I post something about my life and like something I'm struggling with, something that like is really affecting me in life because I'm a human, I will always, and I track this because I have my own problems, right? I track how many followers I lose every time I post something that is real. every time I post something like that, sometimes it's a lot, it's many comments and private messages, sometimes it's not many, sometimes just one or two, but every time. There's never a post where I'm sharing something difficult in my life, something that's contradictory to somebody who's a peer support worker, where I don't get somebody saying, that's so unprofessional, that makes me not want to work with you. Oh, you're a fucking fraud. You're a hack. You're a liar. You're not qualified because you can't deal with your shit. You have struggles. Why should I believe you? And I go, what are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? Right? Like, because I don't perform the autistic peer support person who's figured it all out right? But on the other hand, then I also have people who are like super supportive of that and like, look, he's being so real and also and overdoing it to an extent because I'm fulfilling another idea of the autistic person who is struggling, who talks about their struggling all the time and nothing about their struggling, which I also actually don't love. I just want to be myself and talk. And it's quite annoying. And I'm sure maybe some of those people are going to listen now and go on a Reddit frenzy about it. Hi, I see you.
But what you just said though, that actually gave me a little bit of an aha moment, because I think sometimes when we have these conversations, we're talking about things that are, important to us as autistic people, and we kind of look at the autism community as this, this box, this category. And within that box, we talk about, workshops and coaching and therapy and all of those things. But we can't really separate it from the larger umbrella of wellness, the wellness industrial complex, I guess, for lack of a better term. And there's so much in that larger category of expecting people to put on a bright face, expecting people to only show the good, blaming people for, if you're having a hard time, well, were you thinking negatively? Or, were you complaining? Like, you gotta change that mindset, right? There's so many of these little Instagrammable quotes that get shoved out over the internet. And, we're sitting here going exactly what Matt just said. We just want to be ourselves without being told that, blamed for, our struggles and our challenges, or expected to be perfect or never have a bad day or never complain or never have a negative thought, right? And it is an industrial complex because it is, there's a lot of money involved in this. There's a lot of things that are sold to us because we're told that we need it, or that, this is a problem that you must have, so you must buy this. And it's like, then you ask yourself, but is that one of my problems? Do I really actually need that thing? And if you're still thinking that, there's one way to be autistic, maybe you will buy that weighted blanket, even though you're claustrophobic like me and you feel like you're going to suffocate, right? I don't know. That's just some of the things that have been kind of popping up for me in terms of the huge disconnect between the online social media world and like my day to day.
I mean, I think in both cases, as a public personality, content creator, and as a consumer of said content, we're all chasing this algorithm, right? The algorithm is pulling on both of us, both ends of that, right? Like, you can make so much more traction online if you're either absurdly successful or absurdly miserable or absurdly angry. If you're just one thing and you do it to 11, you'll get way more rewarded for generating clicks than actually being real. Real does not generate clicks like being outrageous, whether it's outrageously negative or positive. And then likewise, when you're consuming the content, like, on the one hand, it's cool when you get stuff fed to you that's like related, right? So a certain amount of, if you're interested in this content, you're interested in this content, can be helpful. But it's also going to say, well, if you get the most agitated from this, we're going to show you more of it. If you clicked on this one kind of product, we're going to be convincing you that a billion more are there. It's the same algorithm either way. So sometimes it's really good to disconnect by literally throwing your phone into a microwave. Sometimes literally just go watch puppy videos instead and just like really rewarp your algorithm. Go dance to a genre of music you've never listened to, either digitally or physically. Like literally, like this algorithmic tunneling thing, it's coming for all of us, no matter which side you're on.
I've actually changed my algorithm as of late to feature influencers living in the Côte Nord, the northern coast of Quebec. And it's like videos about going to ridiculous chain restaurants that serve bad pizza and poutine, and tractors and whales and boots and how to put really cool patches on your parka. Yeah, it's much better than watching a lot of autism material.
Yeah, confuse the algorithm. That's what they don't want you to do.
And hello to all of our wonderful listeners who might be in the Côte Nord de Quebec.
Yeah, I just want to I just want to say one more thing about the masking unmasking thing, because just kind of tie it all together for a second here. When I think about getting, our needs met, right? Sometimes we have a very narrow definition of needs. Well, okay, I need oxygen, I need food, I need water. And those are true. Yes, we have those needs. But like some of the needs that we're talking about today, kind of tangentially, it's like the need for authenticity, the need for like belonging, but based on, being true to yourself, not through some mask or facade, right? The need to be honest with yourself about what you like and what you love and what you want and what you don't want, right? Like that's a need. If you're constantly showing up and just reflecting other people back to them, which raise your hand if you've done that. Um, those are needs too. It's not just to survive, it's to thrive. We're allowed to say that those are needs too. And so, if you are watching something online, like a movie or, social media or something, and, you see an autistic character, doing something or buying something or, being a proponent of something, it's okay to like stop for half a second and say, is that me? Like, is that my thing? I know that in this group alone, we have huge fans of whales and Wheel of Time. Neither thing is really my thing, and that's okay. I'm allowed to learn from you guys and be thrilled by your passion and still honor my own passions, right? Without saying, I love whales, but they're not my special interest. I can't tell you everything about whales, but that's okay, right? Like, in the past, I was the person like, oh, that person's really into that. Maybe I should be into that too. That's awesome. Matt's holding up a pencil pen holder that's in the shape of a whale. But like, do you know what I'm saying? This is the thing. Like, I spent so many years. If I would see somebody, into a particular hobby or a particular interest, be like, oh, well, maybe I should do that too. Like, they look really happy. But like, what makes me happy? Right? That's a need too.
That should be the primary need. I find it. I'm really happy that so many people have rediscovered their love of Lego. But I'm also super disappointed that so many are convincing themselves that Lego is the thing that's going to save their life, and actually might even cause them to have meltdowns because they get frustrated by it.
Especially when you step on one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So to tie that all back to the discourse around love on the spectrum and what masking is and our understandings of that, I think the takeaway is that if you're seeing one very curated view through a very curated lens, maybe don't have one flat monolithic take on what that means. Maybe it's complicated, I think, is how I'm going to try to tie all that together. Some of those people are masking to greater degrees for different reasons, but there is no one takeaway, even as much as that show might try to say that there is. There isn't.
And we can ask more questions. You don't have to take what is handed to you and say thank you. You could ask and investigate for yourself.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for listening to Autistic Stuff for Autistic People. As a reminder, we are all peer support coaches within the Autistic Peer Support Coaching Collective, offering a variety of free and paid intentionally autistic spaces. You can learn more and follow us at our website, autisticcoaches.com. You can best support the podcast by sharing this episode with your friends or joining our Patreon to access ad-free episodes. Thank you for listening to Autistic Stuff for Autistic People. New episodes come out on alternating Mondays. Send us your constructive comments and feedback via email at autisticstuffpodcast@gmail.com. Autistic Stuff for Autistic People is a production of Fox and Raven Media. For more podcasts from Fox and Raven Media, visit our website, foxandravenmedia.com.